second speaker this morning is Margaret Owen. She is a UK barrister with degrees in law from the University of Cambridge and in social administration from the London School of Economics. In recent years, she has focused on women's rights in particular, inspired by her former work as an immigration and asylum lawyer and as head of law and policy division at the International Planned Parenthood Federation. She is the founder and director of Widows for Peace and is also a founder member of Gender Action on Peace and Security. She has also been an advisor on women's and children's rights in the Kurdish Human Rights Project and has monitored elections and observed and reported on several trials of Kurdish politicians, lawyers, academics, journalists and women peace activists. She has extensive experience in countries where the status of women is low and regularly hosts meetings on gender and human rights issues in the UN Commission on the Status of Women. She also trains women's groups on ways to use international legal mechanisms to bring about change in national policies. Her paper this morning is entitled Democracy Deferred, The Continuing Challenges, Political Trials, Identity and Human Rights.
Well, good morning everyone. I'm going to talk, I never read my papers and I do have a paper that I think will be in your report, but I feel much easier just simply speaking. And I think that Denzel asked me to come here and I'm very grateful to him for inviting me because I've been recently observing the trials of the lawyers in Istanbul, and 2 years ago I also observed the beginnings of the KCK trials. And there is something, I always think it's almost like an opera buffo going into a court these days, anywhere in Turkey. It is so far removed from what you here who are studying law at this fine university, what you really expect in a trial situation. It is something extraordinary. Can I have a show of hands of people who have been, apart from our other guest speakers, any of you who have observed what happens in a Turkish court which is trying Kurdish people? Hands up, anybody who's observed a trial? Okay, right.
I'm one of the wicked.
Yes. You know, what is so there are many trials going on, and as you know, in Turkey today there's something like over 10,000 political prisoners. There are journalists, human rights activists, academicians, writers, women's rights activists, head of non-governmental organizations, peace activists, human rights defenders, and now the lawyers. This is something absolutely shocking and labels Turkey as a fascist, chauvinist and racist state, I am afraid. Because when you begin to prosecute your lawyers, you are really undermining everything that is essential to a democracy in a country. Because lawyers and a just legal system are the very basic foundations of democracy, and to prosecute the lawyers as they are doing now in these political trials really makes Turkey, in many of our views, into a pariah state, and one that certainly is nowhere near getting accepted into the European community. And it is a shame for me, a great shame for me, that my own government, the UK government, your government here, actually declines to make any even robust protest to Turkey about the way it is infringing universal human rights standards. And it's interesting, I digress, allow me to digress. On Monday, I was at the Foreign Office when William Hague, our Foreign Secretary, launched his Human Rights and Democracy report. Quite a good thing for you lawyers to look at. And there's a whole list of countries of concern in the context of human rights, but Turkey is not there. And I did put up my hand, and being one of the few women there, I got asked to make my question. I made two very short questions. Why, in the context of William Hague's new initiative on preventing and eliminating sexual violence in conflict, the UK government is deporting Tamils back to Sri Lanka, and what is he doing about Turkey and the trial of the lawyers? and there was absolutely silence on, he didn't actually answer about Turkey, he answered a little bit about Sri Lanka. I've got 5 more minutes. The trials are extraordinary. They breach not just Turkish domestic law, but European Charter of Human Rights law and international law. I've seen 5 minutes left, 15 minutes left. You know that there's a domestic law in Turkey, a 1926 law, which requires that any prosecution of lawyers must actually have the consent of the Ministry of Justice, and no consent was ever asked in these cases. It breaches all articles, so many articles in the European Charter of Human Rights. It also breaches the UN. There's a very, very important UN declaration on the rights of lawyers, and it breaches all that, because what they are doing in these trials against the lawyers on trial in Istanbul today, and we went to the 4th hearing at the end of March, and it's now deferred until June the 20th. They are simply on trial because they are lawyers doing their job. They are the lawyers representing their Kurdish leader, Abdullah Öcalan. And it is absolutely one of the essential articles in that UN resolution that you do not equate the lawyer either with his client or with his client's causes. They are simply doing their job, and they are being tried for that. There is no bail. I've never been... It's unbelievable. There's no reasons given. But these lawyers in the Istanbul trial, there were originally 46 lawyers. 22 are still in jail, and they will have served 500 days in jail before we get to June the 20th. And even people who come back, lawyers who've come back from, one was in Syria, one was in Iraq, and they came back because they saw that they were in this indictment. So obviously they were not going to abscond, and they've been put in detention as well. So there's absolutely no bail. The very ways in which these lawyers have been arrested in the middle of the night was hugely degrading, actually breaches Article 8 of the European Charter on Human Rights, the way it actually affected the families. They took all their files, they took all their discs, they bugged without any legal justification, no warrants. All their conversations were bugged, and even private telephone conversations that some of the lawyers had with their wives were also used in this unbelievable evidence, which is actually illegal because all this evidence was got without any warrant, and all the pleas from the lawyers to have this made inadmissible was rejected. I've probably got half a minute left. I just have to say this. These trials, which are going on right now, and the KCK trial is May the 6th, and the next one is June, are happening at the same time when there's supposed to be a peace process going on, in which Erdogan, the Prime Minister, the AKP party, is now talking to Öcalan. So what on earth is going on? On the one hand, there's this peace process, and the other way, there's this unbelievable, appalling harassment of lawyers, but also journalists and, as I said, trade unionists, academics, and everything. So it is appalling. And I also wanted to say, interesting about Turkey, it's very important in the peace process that other parts of international law are complied with, and there is a very important UN Security Council resolution called 1325. Hands up, you lawyers who've heard of UN Security Council resolution 1325. If not, tomorrow go and Google it and look it up. And it requires that in all actors involved with conflict resolution and peace building must ensure that women's voices are heard. And Turkey has not even begun to develop a national action plan. And if we want a real peace process in Turkey, then we have to have all these people released from jail, at least released to face the, at least out of prison, so that they can properly carry on their lives and be properly represented in court. But also, we need to ensure that when they redraft the constitution and they redraft laws and law reform, civil societies are really part of this, and that also includes the huge problems of all those people in the Kurdish community who suffered for so many years and have so many issues to be resolved that must be listened to and addressed in the peace process. I'm not going to speak anymore because I think I've got less than a quarter of a second left. But I'm very happy to answer more questions on the detail of the trial. Thank you very much.